I survived 100 days on a straight line in hardcore Minecraft. The world is only 3 blocks wide, with barriers along the sides trapping me in. Along the line is a wide variety of biomes and structures, including everything I'll need to beat the game. And the Nether is also a straight line, because the overworld wasn't punishing enough on its own. This challenge was inspired by Skies, and the map was created by me. There will be a world download in the description for those of you who like pain. But I think that just leaves one question. Will I toe the line and overcome the limitations before me, or will I succumb to the claustrophobia and be driven to insanity?
No.
After confirming that I was actually stuck in this lovely world, things began in a very familiar way. I punched a tree for my first wooden pickaxe, and started formulating a plan for avoiding starvation. Unlike a regular world, I couldn't rely on hunting wild animals for my food. While mobs do spawn on this map, passive mobs are quite rare, so I thought it would be smarter to breed them before I ate them. The sheep weren't of much use at the moment, but the chicken was exactly what I was looking for. They're by far the easiest animal to replicate, and because they can do so through laying eggs, they're the ultimate budget-friendly source of protein. Knowing that starvation was mostly off the table, I did a little mining for a basic set of stone tools. And thanks to the 2D Terraria-like nature of the world, you get to watch me like an ant in an ant farm. With my tools crafted, I chopped a few more trees down, and returned to the lake next to spawn. This spot would soon be known as home, so I began cleaning up the area, which is a more pleasant way to describe the destruction of an ecosystem. These chickens had no idea what they were signing up for when they took those seeds. If you've watched my content before, you know that I typically enjoy the homeless life that is living out of a few double chests. I mean, in the last video, I didn't even start building my first house until 3 days after the challenge was supposed to end. But this time around, I got to build in 2D, which for some reason was way more exciting. So here we have the rare Aust starter house. If you've played games like Terraria or Blockheads, you'll understand what I'm going for with the 2D building. And if hearing Blockheads sent you on a roller coaster of nostalgia, you're getting old. It was about as basic of a starter house as you can get, but later I'm planning on building an entire castle, so we're just getting started. Down by the lake, I began working on a garden. Turning around, I witnessed a creeper trying to claim my starter house as his own. I used the door to stun lock him and reclaimed the house with a couple of torches I made using charcoal. And with the front yard spawn-proofed, day 0 came to an end. As the sun was rising on day 1, my hunger bar was falling, and until that problem was solved, taking damage or sprinting would likely result in death. So I spent the morning collecting seeds and chopping trees, with a sliver of hope one might drop an apple. With enough persistence, I eventually got one. It wouldn't be enough to fill the bar entirely, but a second one would, and with yet another apple secured, I might be able to live. Now, before you call me a monster for pelting the sheep with eggs, I've been operating with the understanding that hitting a mob with an egg increases the chances of spawning a chick. And after scouring the internet trying to find evidence of this, I've come to the conclusion that my life is a lie. My sincerest apologies to all of the animals I've egged in my Minecraft career. I began constructing a stairway down to my soon-to-be mine. With no golems around to recycle, I was going to have to get iron the old-fashioned way. It wasn't long before I found my first cave, and lowered myself in using some sand. There really wasn't much in there but some gravel and coal. The cave pretty much killed my staircase idea, so ladders it was. An arguably better plan than relying on chickens for food was getting some string for a fishing rod. But being armed with 2 honey crisps and a hoodie, I wasn't really in position to be spending my nights mob hunting. So I returned to the mines in hopes of finding some iron for a shield. Okay, copper. Copper is useless to me, as far as I know. It's not gonna do... Oh, there's iron. I got 5 ore total and immediately returned home to craft the shield. Unfortunately, there weren't any spiders to try it out on, so that was basically it for day 1. I figured the best way to progress at this point was focusing on mining. I didn't have the food supply to do much more than that. When I made it down to deep slate level, I ran into a dripstone cave. And without a water bucket, my only option was to run away in fear. I needed to grab my sand. And that leads us to this little moment here. Okay. From inside the cave, I could see that it literally had nothing but dripstone. So I continued going deeper until I ran out of ladders. Back on the surface, I grabbed the eggs my chickens had laid and gave them to the sheep. Their numbers were slowly rising, but it would be a while before they'd be a steady food source. Having used all my wood on ladders, it was time to expand the plains biome into the forest. Let's just see how many ways I can avoid mentioning deforestation in this video. In addition to wood gathering, I also wanted to break as much grass as possible. The more seeds I could get, the more chickens I could breed. For better or worse, the journey back home wasn't too eventful. Just a couple zombies, a couple endermen, and creepers. No spiders, no string, no fishing rod. Still hungry. Rather than use the seeds to feed the chickens, I used them to expand the garden. For the small price of short-term starvation, I could have a bright future. All of the night's activities left me with no choice but to eat my last apple. I now had 0 food stored. With my newly crafted bucket, I could expand the garden even further. Going for my morning walk on day 3, I found a bone that must have dropped from a sun-dried skeleton. Trying to find the spiders for a fishing rod last night cost me more food than it was worth. So I decided to put more effort into the chickens. Having them wandering around over the hill meant that I was missing a lot of the eggs that they were laying. It was time to bring home the troops. I built a pen right outside my house so that I could easily grab the eggs as they were laid. The flaw that I noticed immediately was that the fences don't attach to barrier blocks, which meant the chicks could technically just walk right out. The adults were indeed stuck though, and babies tend to follow the adults, so it was good enough for now. While I was playing rancher, I made my way back to the sheep I found on day 0. One of them proposed a temporary solution for my lacking food supply, along with the chicken, and the others accepted wheat as retribution for the heinous crimes they just witnessed. The unfortunate reality of having a 2D world is that my house is now effectively a wall. I had to break down my doors to get the sheep through to the other side. The sheep were there not only for wool, but also to help supplement my food supply. I knew going into this challenge that the initial struggle was going to be food, but I didn't realize how much it would slow things down. Eating the chicken got me up to full hunger for the first time in a long time, and I even had a piece of mutton for the future. Make that 3 extra mutton thanks to the lone sheep over the hill. And now my focus shifted back to collecting iron. Not all wounds could be healed with mutton, so I was going to need some armor. This might be an issue. Oh, okay, well. Having run into a massive cave full of mobs, I decided to try strip mining for the iron. With the world being 3 blocks wide, cave exploration wasn't really a thing, so I figured this would be my best option. The most efficient row to mine on was obviously the middle one, but I made little windows so I could still do the 2D thing. Kind of. Taking a break to check on the chickens, and the garden, and the sheep, I now had enough wool to make a bed, but nowhere to put it. constructionnoises.mp3. I wasn't sure if the barrier blocks at the top of the map would stop phantoms from spawning, but at least I had the bed just in case. Mother Nature was continuing to be generous, and as we approach my house from the front, I'd just like to remind you that it's not meant to be viewed from this angle, so don't look at it. This is the optimal angle. The chickens escaping every time I opened the gate finally annoyed me enough to do something about it. I do miss the times when my house didn't sound like a barnyard. By now, the entire garden was coming along quite nicely, to the point where I could actually fill out the entire thing. Then I returned to the mines. This is where I spent the remainder of the night, just trying to collect as much iron as I could. I returned to the surface with 16 iron ore. While it was smelting, I worked on replacing my grass floor with a cobblestone one, the epitome of success. I used the iron for an iron pickaxe, and with the rest, a second iron pickaxe, pants, and boots. The chickens were coming along nicely now, and armed with a set of fresh pickaxes, I went down to the mines with hopes of completing my set of iron armor. This time I started a new strip mine at Y16. That's where iron spawns the most outside of mountains. After spending the entire night mining, I returned home with 15 iron ore. Not as much as I'd hoped, but it would be enough to complete my armor. Some of the garden was ready to harvest, and I ended up expanding it one more time. Eventually I'd want to start breeding cows for an enchanting setup, so the more of a head start I could get on the wheat, the better. I dropped the iron off in the furnace, made a helmet, and waited patiently for the rest to smelt. And now that I'd posed for the camera in my new armor, it was time to prepare chicken. But this chicken was road chicken. I was leaving. Just as I wanted to get a head start on wheat growing, I also wanted to get a head start on cows. And that meant actually finding some. Up until this point, I hadn't had much trouble finding the animals I needed. There were chickens and sheep on both sides of my spawn point, so I had hopes that this would be easy. My food supply was decent, but it wasn't enough to take damage or sprint too much, so I had to be careful. Wild sheep were essentially free food since I already had a pair back home. I was also grabbing seeds as I went so that I could breed all the chickens when I got back home. While this map does have much lower mob spawns, it being a straight line means I have to fight every single thing that spawns in front of me. I spent the rest of day 6 and most of day 7 pushing onwards. And while I did find a jungle, there were no cows. So when I ran into the desert around 1300 blocks out, I took it as a sign to turn around. A sad result, but I had gained a bunch of seeds, random loot, and knowledge. Knowledge that my expeditions to find specific things in this world were going to take a lot more than 10 minutes, and 4 pieces of fried chicken. Here's a peek at everything I brought back with me. I used the seeds to breed all the chickens, and I still had enough to feed them a few more times. Then it was back to the mines, but this time with a different goal in mind. The only thing that would make me feel better after traveling 2600 blocks for seeds was diamonds. After lighting up the cave and connecting the ladder, I still had to go a bit deeper. I mined into day 8, and if you're wondering how I do the ant farm shots like this, or any of the time lapses in this video, it's all thanks to a mod called Flashback. It's not a sponsor or anything, it's just an amazing tool. I kept mining until my iron pickaxes were broken, and after finding 0 diamonds and 1 iron, I was somehow more poor than I was when I started. It's almost like deleting 99% of the world and then locking myself in the remaining sliver created a scarcity problem. Oh no. At least the food scarcity was easily solvable. The thing about not having explorable caves is that it makes it much more difficult to mine with iron picks and turn a profit. Perhaps diamonds would be different, but mining through deep slate with stone tools to find them didn't exactly sound enticing. I'm not sure if I was lucky with my mining earlier, but this time it took 10 minutes to find any iron. I found 6 though, which was good enough for now. I had chickens to tend to. Nice. With this many, I was starting to consider upgrading the pen. Not because I wanted to give them more personal space, the harvesting already achieves that. I wanted to reap the fruits of every seed I sowed, or in layman's terms, I was tired of my eggs despawning. And while it wasn't exactly cheap, a single hopper and some water would eliminate this problem once and for all. I spent a few minutes brainstorming the new coop design.
Yeah, so the chickens. We need all of them in a... how do we do it? I think we just give up on breeding chickens when we have a design like this. We don't have mine. So probably just... we have so many eggs, we have stacks on stacks. We just, if we're actually after collecting them, and at that point it's just a chicken.
Let's just make this simple. Yeah, after all that, I basically ended up with a hole. But now anytime I'm within window distance, I'll be getting every single egg that drops. Making it work when I'm away from home is a problem for later. Not a bad first 10 days if you ask me. I didn't starve, built a starter house, got a full set of iron armor, and accumulated a flock of chickens that are both friends and food. Next up on the agenda was diamonds. This time I was saving my iron pick for ores only, even if that meant dealing with the excruciatingly slow speed of a stone pick on deep slate. Lucky for you, I have replays for that. 8 diamonds from the first vein, enough to call it quits. What's more excruciatingly slow than mining deep slate with stone? Me crafting that pickaxe? Mining your first obsidian. Once I had the magic number 14, enough for a portal and an enchanting table, it was time to rise from the depths and tend to my garden. In the 15 minutes I was away from home, the chickens had laid 50 eggs. Those eggs yielded an unknown amount of baby chickens. Finally having access to a half-decent amount of food, I was planning on having another go at kidnapping a cow. Cow-napping, if you will. I had just a couple things I wanted to take care of first though. Between my house and the chicken coop, I set up my nether portal. It didn't exactly give me the best of spawns, so I came back with some burner pickaxes and started a staircase down. I eventually found an opening with some not so nice inhabitants who had a disagreement over which one of them was going to kill me. Soul sand was the objective of this operation. I returned home with it, grabbed an ender pearl, and began constructing a makeshift chunk loader. For those of you who don't know, a chunk loader is a contraption that keeps an area of the map loaded at all times. In the newer versions, thrown ender pearls actually load chunks, which makes them the cheapest option. Throwing one in a bubble column creates a stasis chamber, and the pearl will just sit there forever, loading the area around it. So now, during the time that I'm out looking for cows, or away from the base, my chickens will be loaded and their eggs collected. After grabbing some wheat, I was ready to begin my journey. The reason passive mobs are so difficult to find on this map is because 99% of the map is gone. But also because they spawn weird. Almost all the animals you see in a regular Minecraft world spawn as the chunks are generated. But because this map was made after all the chunks were generated, the only passive mobs on the map are the ones that happen to be near the center of the 3-wide line. Any of the ones near the edge when the barriers were placed were suffocated or pushed off. That's sad. In addition to killing our animals, I have a suspicion that the barrier blocks are also lowering the spawn rates of every mob. But that's not confirmed because I'm too lazy to do the testing. So allegedly. Day 13 I found a mangrove swamp, so naturally I felt the need to adopt a fish. And not too long after, I hit the jackpot. 2 healthy cows. Sure, they were 3,200 blocks away from home, but with nether travel, I could cut that down to 400. Had I thought of that in the first place, I would have brought the obsidian for a portal. But that's okay, the return trip is always a little faster. I made it back before sunrise, and confirmed that the chunk loader was indeed working. Then it was time to pick a spot for my new fish to live. In hindsight, under a ladder probably wasn't the smartest option. But this is Minecraft, so he'll be okay. Just like the chickens. And my food problem was pretty much solved at this point. Down to the mines to get obsidian for the cow portal. I'm still going to make you watch it, but how about one of these? Nice. Then it was just a matter of setting up a safe path through the nether. Because I was going to need to find a nether fortress eventually, I staircased down until I was closer to ground level. Then I just needed to keep tunneling. Until... What? I had my diamond pick with me, so I was able to collect it. But there's still something weird about finding ancient debris and then going back to mining with a stone pickaxe. After some more tunneling, I heard a sound. Wither skelly. That meant there was a fortress nearby, so I dug up a bit until I found the opening. After clearing out the mobs, I was able to go up, and the advancement pretty much confirmed that it was buried in the terrain somewhere above my tunnel. After some digging, I found it. And some nether warts. I found an opening behind the first room that had some more fortress in it, along with another wither skeleton. But I came here for cows, not fights. So I dealt with the remaining mobs and continued my path. By day 15, I made it to -400. Naturally, it was over a pool of lava, but there was also a warped forest over here, which would be really useful for farming pearls later. I couldn't afford to drop any cows into a lava bath, so I had to make a railing along the path. The portal came out right on top of the cows, and the only thing left to do was escort them through the nether, and breed them just in case one didn't make it home. The image I'm about to show you may be disturbing. What the... Just a slight bug with one of my resource packs that causes baby animals to not have eyes. Welcome to Minecraft. The trip back to the main portal was rather uneventful, and once the cows were through the portal, one of the more time-consuming expeditions was complete. One of them. I built a pen for them down by the garden. Having 0 iron left and very nearly 0 shield was a problem. so I went down to the one place that could solve it. And because I was too lazy, or efficient, to run all the way to the end of my previous tunnel, I chose to start another one a couple blocks below it, where I immediately found a 6 vein. Job done. And I won't bore you too much with the chickens going forward. Just know that I now have more than enough to maintain my food supply. And a new shield. So what's another one of those time-consuming expeditions, one might ask? Sugarcane. In a normal world, finding sugarcane is pretty straightforward. You'd be unlucky not to find some around any river or ocean you came across. In this world, it's literally straightforward. Just not in the way that you would want. I'll get into the reasons why shortly, but here's a cool cave I found at the bottom of an ocean with some iron in it. After traveling another 2,000 blocks beyond the portal and finding 0 sugarcane, it became clear that I probably wasn't going to want to walk all the way back to that portal once I did find some. So when I heard lava pops at the top of a hill, I followed them to the source and got some obsidian for a new one. Back on the surface, I ran into the remnants of a village, which basically just meant free wheat, because the rest of it was non-existent. Oh, phantoms can spawn, look at that. And while I show you the next 30 minutes of traveling, I'd like to mention that this world is 10,000 blocks long in each direction. It's a slice taken from a regular Minecraft seed, and other than making sure it had as many biomes as possible, and a stronghold, I didn't check much else because I assumed 20,000 blocks was more than enough to cover the basics of Minecraft progression. I reached the end of the line on day 18. Despite running into dozens of bodies of water on the way out here, there was somehow not a single piece of sugarcane. And having explored about 60% of the entire world, I was beginning to worry that there might not be any. But the focus now was getting home. 10,000 blocks is only 1250 in the nether. Not a short trip navigating new nether terrain, but way better than backtracking all the way to spawn. It took about 15 minutes to make it back and connect the path. Back at home, I got an advancement and started unloading all the junk I accumulated on my journey. I think I made this clear before, but in case I didn't, I need sugarcane for paper and books. Without it, I can't make an enchantment setup or firework rockets, neither of which I can live without. So I went back into the mine for some more obsidian. And then it was time to head in the opposite direction. I wanted to get access to enchantments as soon as possible, mainly fortune, because I was very quickly draining my starter area of resources. And fortune would basically double everything I mined. I ran into a bunch of new biomes, from Badlands to warm oceans, a mushroom island. I will never forgive the Minecraft movie for memifying this magnificent creature. The fears of the line being a sugarcaneless world grew stronger and stronger the further I traveled, and those fears were confirmed when I ran into the barriers 10,000 blocks from spawn. There was no sugarcane on either side of the line. If you asked me what the odds were of a 20,000 block strip containing sugarcane, before making this video I would have said 100%. Yet here I am, without sugar, caneless if you will, returning through the nether after navigating the entire map. If we look at the bright side, I now know that there's a much better nether fortress just 200 blocks from the spawn portal. There isn't much actual fortress, but at least it's not buried. By the time I made it back, it was day 23. Roughly 2 hours of sugarcane searching for nothing. But worry not, dear viewer, this story isn't over. The fact that this world has no sugarcane is a mistake on my part. I should have checked it before I finished the map. But what if the map wasn't finished? What if I was able to expand the map beyond the 10,000 blocks and add more chunks using a program called MCA Selector, without affecting my save? More chunks that just so happen to contain sugarcane. Well, then I could just travel back to the end of the world through my portals to find what was rightfully mine from the start. Now, the 2 hours I wasted trying to find a resource that usually takes 2 minutes were only kind of wasted, and I can continue playing the map as intended. Getting enough paper and leather for a full enchanting setup was going to take time, and I still had to figure out how I was going to get the XP to use it. Traditional XP farms aren't possible on this map for reasons I shouldn't have to explain. But what could work, even with the spatial restrictions, is a mob spawner. And now it was time to use the skinny map to our favor. This is a pie chart. It's part of Minecraft's F3 menu that you may have seen speedrunners use. Right now it's showing all of the block entities in my render distance, which includes chests and, more importantly, spawners. By lowering my render distance and walking the line, I can find an area with a dungeon. So that's what I did, eventually detecting a spawner 200 blocks from home. Normally, speedrunners use the pie chart to locate bastions and fortresses. For that, you usually only need a direction, because they're large and often exposed. Pinpointing the location of a small buried dungeon was beyond my skill level, so I hope this angle helps convey the frustration I experienced during the next 45 minutes of trying to find it. It wasn't until after I found it that I realized it was a cave spider spawner, the most annoying kind for an XP farm, but it was going to have to work because I was not wasting another hour finding a new one. I began hollowing out the main spawning room, obliterating my diamond pickaxe in the process. If you can't already tell, this thing is going to be inefficient for a handful of reasons. Number 1, half the spawning area is basically unusable. Number 2, some of the spiders are going to spawn outside of the barrier and fall into the void. And number 3, daylight stops the spawner from working. So we're basically going to be working with a quarter of the normal rates. But that's a quarter more than we have now. Stopping back at base for materials, I planted some more sugarcane, and noticed I now had so many chickens that they developed their own gravitational pull. Whoa. I made a replacement diamond pick, bred the cows, and grabbed some more obsidian for a portal to the XP farm. 20 to be exact. Back down there, I set up one side of the portal, and with that linked up, I grabbed the stuff I'd need for the rest of the farm. Because the rates were going to be so slow, I wanted to try to maximize the XP by any means necessary. In recent versions of Minecraft, the meta for farming XP has changed. I'm not sure if Mojang knew it at the time, but when they added infested potions to the game, almost every other way of farming XP became less relevant. And while I didn't have the allays, snow golems, or armadillos needed to build those new farms, the goal was to have a dispenser I could load with infested potions, and activate to splash the spiders. Then I'd kill them with a low damage weapon to maximize the silverfish spawns for some extra XP. Upon finishing the farm, I couldn't actually use it yet because of the daylight, but that at least gave me the chance to remove the torches safely. I also made sure the room was cobbled deep slate to stop the silverfish from infesting the blocks. To brew the potions, I was going to need to find a blaze rod. So I went to the open fortress I found earlier to see what I could do. Nether fortresses have a big bounding box, so while it may look like we only have little bits of a fortress to work with, blaze and wither skellies should spawn anywhere I put nether bricks in the area. So my best bet to increase the spawns was actually to destroy the remnants of the real fortress and build my own with the blocks. With a little over 5 stacks of nether bricks to work with, I ran home for a second to pick up some extra netherrack. And then I began building out the platforms for the fortress mobs to spawn on. I built it above the original pathway so I wouldn't have to fight my way through mobs to get to the other side. I also added these safety things every few blocks that would give me a wall to hide from fireballs, and a low roof to block the wither skellies. The smart thing to do would have been building said safety things as I placed in the nether brick. Lesson learned. This is also where my trusty cooked chicken began to fail me. Each piece only restores 2.5 hearts, so it's not exactly a reliable counter to fire. I finally gave in and used the bow to get rid of one blaze, and that gave me the space I needed to weed out the rest. I got some magma cream from the magma cube, and once its minions were dispatched, without angering the pigmen, I was able to kill the last blaze and install the rest of the safety things. Is what I would have done if I cared about future me. But I instead threw that opportunity out the window and went back to the top layer to farm some more blaze rods. I returned home with 5 total, plenty for a brewing stand and the powder to power it. As for nether warts, I got some from the first fortress I found earlier, so all I needed to do was make a small patch to plant some more so I wouldn't run out. So for the first time, we actually get to see the cave spider farm in use. Because the water pushes the spiders outside of the spawning zone, I don't need to kill them to get more to spawn, which means I can just pile up a bunch and maximize the use of each infested potion. By the morning I had a decent stockpile of spiders, and it was time to see what kind of XP gains we were working with. There were some pretty obvious issues with the fences, but nothing I couldn't fix. In an ideal world, I would have used a wooden sword to get more silverfish out of them, but I forgot to make one and I was worried about the infested effect running out. I already explained why my expectations were low for this farm, but nothing could have prepared me for the whopping half a level that I gained. Now, granted, that was only half the night and my level was already pretty high. But what that meant is that in peak conditions, with a night full of AFKing and a wood sword for more silverfish, I would probably struggle to even go from level 27 to 30. To say this farm was a disappointment would be the understatement of the 100 days. But did I regret building it? Yes. Yes, I did. XP was only a small piece of the puzzle though, and the thing that was actually more of a bottleneck at the moment was sugarcane. Because I was on version 1.21.4, chunk loaders didn't work for crop growth yet, meaning if I wanted to get enough paper for all the bookshelves, I would have to find something to do around spawn. That something was going to be building a base. Now, you might be wondering how I could ever hope to build something more perfect than my starter house. And to that, I'm offended, but let me show you the vision. In my spare time a few months back, I started a new Terraria world, and I ended up building a pretty cool castle. Naturally, I got bored and stopped playing, but I thought this would be the perfect chance to try to recreate it in Minecraft, since I was already dealing with a 2D world. Of course, a build of that scale was going to require a lot of materials. For the castle itself, I figured deep slate brick would most resemble the original look, and I already had a decent amount of that from the mines. For the floors, I was stuck between using dark oak wood or spruce, neither of which I had, so I traveled all the way to the end of the world through the nether to grab the dark oak first. I collected about 2.5 stacks throughout the night. For the spruce, there was actually some on a snowy hill not too far away. Unfortunately, the 2 trees that were here weren't going to be enough. On the way home, I lost my shield to the local wildlife. So I made a quick stop at home to grab a replacement and a couple more axes. I was also going to need a blue block for the roof, and since I needed stairs and slabs, that pretty much left warped wood as my only option. After I'd chopped down the easier trees, I decided to get the spruce over with first, and grab the rest of the warped on the way back. It took a bit to get to a taiga, but I chopped down what I could from the snowy one, and then went to the giant taiga for the rest. These ones are my favorite type of tree to destroy. No hidden logs, no messy leaves, minor PTSD from chopping down hundreds of them in my egg farming video, but still my favorite. Fun fact, rainbows are actually full circles in real life. You just can't see the bottom half. 5.5 stacks was enough for me, and on the way home I grabbed some sand for glass. Unfortunately, with the world being 3 blocks wide, only about half the saplings can actually grow in the overworld, and spruce is not one of them. That's not too much of a restriction though, because you can always grow them in the end dimension later. My boat. No. The trip home through the nether was fun, as always. I learned that baby magma cubes can hit you diagonally through blocks. And then the last ingredient was the rest of the warped wood. First, I'd like to introduce you to my new friend Pippin. He enjoys the simple pleasantries of life, gold clothes, the sacrifice of otherworldly beings, and long walks on the beach. I used bone meal to grow more warped fungi, and once I had enough stems, I did a small experiment to see how close I could get to dying. Pretty close. And then returned home to begin the building process. I chose the hill behind my house as the building zone, flattened it out a bit, and moved the materials over to a nearby chest. Building in 2D in Minecraft is already its own challenge, but trying to replicate the dimensions of a Terraria build takes it to another level. I spent the entire first day just trying to do that. I ended up using spruce planks for the floor because I liked the look of them better, and they were also a lot cheaper than stripped dark oak. And this is when we finally got to start making some progress with the sugarcane. I used it to make paper, a few books, and my enchanting table. I assumed there was a pretty good chance I'd run out of deep slate while building the castle, so I wanted to try to get my hands on an enchanted pickaxe before that happened. The nice thing is, once I had the dimensions for one room figured out, I could use it as a reference for the rest of the build. The spiral staircase was probably the biggest challenge, because Minecraft really doesn't have anything like a Terraria platform. I had to find a balance between looks and functionality, so it went through many iterations before I finally got something that both looked and functioned like a spiral staircase. At this point, I wasn't sure what to do next. Remember that thing I mentioned about wanting to have an efficiency pickaxe before running out of deep slate? Like, literally a minute ago. That was looking less and less likely. Even though I'd been keeping up with the paper and leather production, it was going to be a bit before I had enough for a full set of bookshelves. At the moment, I had enough for 5, and I decided to see what that would get me. There wasn't much of a choice where to put it, but I did embed it in the floor since a full set would take up the entire width of the room. It was only enough to unlock level 10 enchants, which didn't seem worth it to me. So in the meantime, I worked on just about everything I could that didn't require deep slate, starting with the back walls. I found cobblestone rather unimpressive looking, so that didn't stay for very long. And then I gave in and just enchanted the pickaxe. There was no point in waiting for a full enchanting setup. I needed deep slate now, and efficiency 2 on a diamond pick couldn't be that bad considering I was using stone last time I was down there. I mined for about 20 minutes in one direction, and then went back to the ladder to begin mining in layers. The decision to stop happened around the time that my pickaxe noped out. I gathered about 11 stacks total, which I hoped would be enough to finish the castle. I also got 2 more bookshelves, bringing us to level 14 enchants. Yay. Then the building resumed. I'll put the reference back on the screen for this one, just so you can see what I was going for. We were obviously going to lose some detail converting things over to Minecraft, simply because the blocks are much bigger here. But the overall shape was coming along quite nicely. By the time I'd finished the frame of everything but the tower, I was down to less than 2 stacks of deep slate already. A rather upsetting realization that I tried to avoid by working on my book collection. Shockingly, avoiding my problems didn't bring me more deep slate, but then, even more shockingly, it did. I'd completely forgotten about the row of deep slate inside my ores chest, but this saved me from needing to mine more with a stone pick. For now, at least. I'm not sure which part of the castle was more difficult, the spiral staircase or the tower, but both required a bunch of experimenting. The tower did take a lot longer to build though. The roof is where things got really interesting, as I just flat out didn't have the same type of blocks that Terraria has. But with enough trial and error, I ended up with a somewhat accurate shape. The rest of the roofs were extremely simple, and that just leaves us with the background walls. I already tried cobblestone for them, which looked wrong. Something about having a lighter background than the foreground just doesn't work well. Which is probably why Terraria's walls are usually darker than the blocks they're made from. This last harvest got me enough bookshelves to finish the enchanting setup, so I now had access to perfect enchants. Since cobblestone was too light, I tried some cobbled deep slate next, but even that was still lighter than the walls. Of course, I put it in the largest room and completely filled in the background. Tearing it back down with the stone pickaxe was not going to happen. My diamond supply was quite limited, but I had enough for 1 more pickaxe, and I wasn't going to waste the durability without enchanting it first. To my surprise, I actually rolled Fortune 3 on it. That didn't make much of a difference for tearing down the wall, but it would be useful later. Next up on the list was deep slate tile, but that wasn't quite doing it for me either. It was just too busy of a texture. There was one more block that I thought might have potential. It starts with B and ends in lackstone. I had to walk 1,000 blocks to find some, so in case I liked it, I mined a couple stacks. It's probably not gonna look good. I had my doubts, but it was still worth a shot. Yeah, no. The blackstone looking bad didn't really leave me with many options. So back to the cobbled deep slate for the final decision. Even though tiled deep slate was the exact color I wanted, its texture just clashed too much with the brick of the castle. So I ended up settling for cobbled deep slate. I didn't quite have enough for the entire castle, only a couple rooms. But returning to the mines gave me the chance to use my new fortune pick on the diamond ore that I was saving for exactly that. And now that I had them, it didn't make sense to waste a fortune pick on collecting deep slate. It made more sense to enchant a new disposable one. I did want to check the enchant on the diamond boots before locking anything in though. I'm just worried that I'm gonna have to roll this too many times. Well, that enchant couldn't have been better. Having unbreaking and efficiency meant that I could save the durability of my fortune pick for mining ores only. I mined through the entire night and into day 50. In the process, I ran into another one of those massive iron veins. On the way back up to the surface, I finally decided that this would be the last time I climbed this ladder. It takes almost an entire minute to go from the bottom to the top. So if I go mining 20 times, that's almost a full day wasted. In the moment, the thought process went more like ladder slow, water faster, ladder bad. But that was enough to kickstart the construction of the water elevator. It took 4 minutes to complete, the equivalent of 4 trips up the ladder. And it only takes 18 seconds to swim to the surface. So now if I go mining 20 more times, I only waste 6 minutes, plus the 4 from construction. Half as much time. As long as I go mining 6 more times over the next 50 days, I've just saved myself some time. I mean, I'm drowning slightly, but that's an acceptable amount of drowning. Someone needs to put this in an Algebra 1 book. So I spent the rest of the night and most of day 51 filling in the rest of the backgrounds. The tower roof went through a few variations because I couldn't decide between deep slate or warped planks. But with it being a roof, the deep slate just didn't make much sense. And the rest of the rooms were easy. For the finishing touches, I still had some windows to add, starting with the biggest one up in the tower. And for some of the other windows, I wanted to try using iron bars to match the castle theme. I made a blast furnace to speed up the process, and placed it in what would soon become my new crafting room. And I really liked the look of the iron bars. Glass just didn't make as much sense for these lower rooms of the castle. And the bars also added some extra depth. I did go back and slim them down a little bit once I was done, so they wouldn't take up the entire wall. The last step before I moved in was adding the storage room. I wanted to organize this as much as possible. In the starter base, I was quite limited by space, but here I had freedom. Moving thousands of items over to the new storage wasn't exactly something I was looking forward to. So I procrastinated by furnishing some of the rooms I wasn't planning on using. I also got to try out some of the new paintings. I went with a couple of 2x2s in the larger room, a small painting of a poppy in another, and to mix things up, a large one on display in one of the upstairs rooms. The paintings instantly gave the castle a much needed pop of color. The Terraria version had lots of hanging lanterns, so I wanted to add those in as well. The only room in the castle that was completely empty was the greenhouse. To fill it with flowers, I was going to need pots, so I went on a journey for clay, a whole 20 blocks from home. In addition to the clay pots, I also wanted a planter box at the bottom for crops, and over top, the trapdoors would work as a shelf for the potted plants. In my journey up and down the line, I'd gathered a nice variety of flowers, so those would be perfect to put in the pots. For some reason, I thought water would fertilize the land from below. Not my smartest moment. I also thought sugarcane could go in a pot, but I guess I was thinking of cactus. Here's the flowers though, and a couple saplings, and cactus. In the big painting room, I thought it would look nice to have a shelf below it to better fill the space up. And here we have our mostly finished castle on day 55. Unfortunately, that meant it was time to move all the items over. I think the best way to show that process is going to be a time lapse. So here it is, 25 minutes of item moving. The last thing to move was my bed, and then I made a new iron axe. Considering my starter home was now just an empty wooden box, as opposed to a full wooden box I guess, I figured the area would just look better without it. By the morning, it was almost like it never existed. My pet fish got relocated to the lake. Quite an upgrade over the hole that it had been living in under my ladder. And then I replaced the old floor with dirt. Some castles have a moat filled with water as their first line of defense. Mine had a chicken pit, and I'm not sure which one's scarier. Chicken pits are great when you're starving, but I now had access to unlimited steak. It was time to embrace a life of royalty. What I didn't need was a nether full of chickens, so I fenced off the portal first, and then did some more landscaping. Naturally, the lack of a chicken pit meant that they were now free range, and while that did mean that I could sell their eggs for 75% more, I preferred that they free roamed away from my front door, so I brought them through the castle into the backyard, where they'd hopefully leave me in peace. All except one, who I allowed to stay out of laziness or kindness. You be the judge. It was again time to restock the wood supply. After the trees were chopped, I had to chop my way back home as well. Day 58, I was faced with the challenge of figuring out what to do next. I wanted to fight the dragon as soon as possible, but first I wanted enchanted diamond armor. So I could just go mining for diamonds the boring way, but we both know by the structure of this sentence that I had other plans. I was tired of wasting pickaxe durability on strip mining. Both XP and diamonds were hard to come by, so it was important that I made them last as long as possible. One way to make that happen was by not using them for mining at all. That brings us to the mangrove swamp. At night, slimes can spawn in this biome, depending on the phase of the moon. If I could farm some slimes for some slime blocks, I'd be able to build myself a TNT mining machine. I've already explained a few times that mob spawns are very slow on this map. The only way I was going to have a chance at getting slimes was to take the mangrove out of the mangrove swamp. I spent the night clearing space and killing all the mobs I could find, but I wasn't lucky enough to get any slimes. I used the daylight on day 59 to clear an even bigger spawning area, and that night would mark the true test of whether or not this was going to be a viable plan. There were only a few mobs at any given time. In a regular Minecraft world, there's usually 70, and even then, slimes take up a small fraction of those spawns. So basically, this was a long shot. I gave it the rest of the night, and after still not getting a single slime, I retired the plan. Sure, it would have been more fun to use a TNT mining machine, but sometimes the world just doesn't let you have your way, and this world in particular was highly skilled at that. On the way home, I figured it would be a good time to collect some of the ender pearls I needed for the dragon fight. And I also wanted to fix the hoglin issue along my nether pathway, so I mined a bunch of netherrack, found some ancient debris, and used the blocks to add an extra row on the top. In case you needed an extra reminder how bad the cave spider XP farm was, 6 minutes of random enderman killing got me more XP than the 10 minutes that I used the farm. I got the 12 ender pearls and returned to the overworld just in time for sunrise. One of the mobs I killed since leaving the base dropped some gold feather falling boots. I don't feel like looking for the clip of it happening, and I'd never even ended up using them anyways, so I have nothing to prove here. It took me a minute to figure out how pointless that was. I just used 3 levels. Placing down my second fish in the lake made me feel a little better. Since my TNT mining machine was still nothing more than a fantasy, I was going to have to get my diamonds the old-fashioned way. It just simply wasn't worth wasting any more time to get slime when I only needed enough diamonds for 1 set of armor. And in less than a minute, I already found my first vein, which turned out to be 2 veins right next to each other. So that was 17 out of the 24 diamonds I needed. Literally 30 seconds after that, I found more. This time, just 2. But it really made me question why I just spent a half an hour trying to farm slime. With all the luck I just had in my first 2 minutes of mining, I decided to stop while I was ahead and go back to the surface. The 1 diamond I had in my chest was the perfect amount to complete my set of armor, because I already had the boots crafted. So then it was just a matter of enchanting everything. Normally I get really picky with my gear and try my best to max out the enchantments. But normally I'm not playing on a 3-wide world with a quarter of an XP farm and no access to villagers. So I guess we found the circumstances needed to lower my standards. The protection 3 chestplate was good enough for me. I got the same thing on the helmet, minus the unbreaking, and I could say that it took a lot of restraint to not go for better enchantments. But I literally couldn't afford to, so that made the decision a lot easier. One area that I could not compromise was the bow, and luckily I didn't have to, because I got the only 2 enchantments that I needed first try. We have ourselves a dragon slayer. At that point I was out of levels, so I spent what little of the night I had left at the spider farm, and in the morning I was ready for infinite XP. With the half a level I just got, I estimated that it would take about 3 full nights to get back to level 30 using this farm. So this was the last time ever that you'll see me using this farm. There were other ways of getting XP, and the best option that I could think of was using the fortress. To keep the blaze from flying out the top floor, I tried adding a roof. Just to keep the... What the... Dude, that's so loud. And then I added some of the safety barriers that I previously mentioned. With that, the farming could begin. I decided to stop at 31 levels, but before moving on to the enchanting bit, I have to point out the back-to-back wither skeleton skulls I got here. That's a 1 in 1600 chance of happening without looting, so I couldn't just ignore it. With my levels, I ended up taking Protection 3 on the boots as well. For the leggings, I just needed another 2 levels for Protection 4, so back to the fortress farm I went for hopefully the last round of XP. Back at base, I grabbed the enchantment and completed my set. After crafting the Eyes of Ender, I grabbed some temporary blocks for the end, stuff to make some firework rockets for my future elytra, an extra shield, slow falling potions since I didn't have feather falling, a bucket of milk in case I didn't like those potions, and some obsidian so I could make a portal in the stronghold. All that was left was to go find it. Okay, well, turns out, because of the way I made the map, the Ender Eyes were still attracted to the deleted strongholds that used to be outside the line. That was a problem. The only way the Ender Eye would point me to the real stronghold was if I already was closer to it than the deleted ones. Because I made the map, I wasn't completely left guessing. I did know that the stronghold was in a Badlands biome to the north, so I set out in that direction. About 1,000 blocks in, I threw another Ender Eye to see if I was close enough to get an accurate reading. So now I was down to 14. At 2,000 blocks, I tried again. You might think that was a waste of an eye, but I'll show you a waste of an eye. Oh. And then I had a realization. I'm going the wrong way. It's south. I've got 12 eyes left. I've walked 2,000 blocks in the wrong direction, wasted 10 minutes. The entire time saying that I knew where I was going.
I did know that the stronghold was in a Badlands biome to the north.
Luckily, I was only another 1,000 blocks from a portal that would take me home. And since I was now low on eyes, for reasons we will never bring up again, I grabbed 3 more blaze rods on the way home, and used the pearls I had left to replenish my eye supply. So now I was back to the same spot that I was 20 minutes ago, but this time I actually knew which direction not to go. I used the same methods as before, throwing an eye after 1,000 blocks, and this is what I was expecting to happen the first time. Could I have just waited until the Badlands biome to throw the eyes? Yes, but that just felt too easy. At 2,000 blocks I threw another one, and this time it went behind me, so I climbed the mountain. But then the eye went out of line, so I had no idea what was going on anymore. Why? I double checked at 2,200 blocks, and it was definitely still pointing to that hill behind me. Why it was going so far to the side when I was up on the hill was beyond me. Maybe the bounding box is off-centered and the eye points to the middle, but it didn't really matter because I knew it had to be under me. Down at deep slate level, I fell into a cave where fun ensued. But I had mined the entire way down without finding it. On the way down, there was a mine shaft I found that I tried to explore more. Turns out I just needed to go a few more blocks. I put the coords in the chat so that I could link the nether portal later, built it, and here it goes. Once the dragon was defeated, I claimed the XP, bringing me to level 71, and I was ready to raid some end cities. I didn't immediately find any coming out of the gateway, but I did have a decent amount of land to work with, so I ran. Ran some more, bridged, frolicked, another word for bridged, until I just barely spotted one in the fog. This one didn't have an end ship, but I needed some shulker shells still, so it wasn't completely useless. I made my way up the parkour staircase and into the next building, where I was reminded how fun it is to get hit by movement restricting homing missiles. But joke's on them, they floated me up to the loot, which may have just been the worst end city chest known to man. So that was enough for me. Luckily, the next city was just a couple hundred blocks away. And this one had a ship. A ship that I was wasting no time getting to. Once I was completely sure that I couldn't mess my pearl up, I boarded the ship. Threw its occupants overboard, and the elytra was mine. One chest had nothing, and the other a whopping 14 diamonds. I made some rockets with the materials I brought, and I could finally fly. What better way to use the gift of flight than theft? I originally debated if I should make the end dimension a straight line as well, but I wasn't even sure how to do that without breaking the dragon fight. That, coupled with the fact that finding an end ship would have been next to impossible, made an end dimension line too complicated. Just consider this temporary glimpse of freedom as my reward for enduring the line. Having shulker boxes meant that I could pretty much keep looting end cities as long as I wanted. Short of bringing villagers back from extinction, this was the best way to get a good set of armor and tools, including ones with mending, so I committed to doing exactly that. Like I mentioned before, I'm someone who likes to max out all their gear through trading before the dragon fight, sometimes even with netherite, but this run might have changed that for me. What's the point in putting in all that extra effort when you can spend a fraction of the time just stealing what you want? Getting multiple elytras was crucial here, because I didn't have any way of getting mending on them, and the durability of my first one was already half. I'd already filled one shulker, and for my next trick, I'll demonstrate what happens when you jump from an end ship with no elytra. I almost just died. Alright, let's not do that. So for the next 15 minutes, I grabbed as much loot as I could from every end city I could find. I'll show you the haul in just a second, but this was also good. And we'll go through. Ho 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 ho. I'm having fun right now, that's what's happening. We're just having fun, we're having a good old time. And with that, I was back home. If you want to pause and look at the loot, you can do that, but it's pretty much just everything you'd expect from end busting. What I will point out is that my elytra is practically broken after 20 minutes of use. And while I have replacements, they're almost just as useless without enchantments. So it was time to get mending, which meant bringing back villagers. The quickest way to make that happen was building a mob farm. Now, slight problem with that idea. How does one build a 3-wide mob farm? It's complicated. I experimented with a couple of designs, but in the end, I found this one to be the most intriguing. Not necessarily because it's efficient. It was expensive, complex, and still slow. But it works, and it's kinda cool. I'll go into more detail during the building process, but all those redstone components weren't going to craft themselves. Luckily, I uncovered a bunch of redstone ore when I was mining for diamonds, so that gave me a head start. I mined in one direction for about 15 minutes, emptied my inventory, and then did the same going the opposite direction until I had enough. That brings us to day 71, and that mining trip wasn't just necessary for the redstone. The deep slate was actually just as important because I needed it as the building block. This mob farm uses 3 stacks of pistons, so unfortunately I didn't quite have enough iron. But just like the redstone, mining for iron set us up for another 2 birds 1 stone situation, as I didn't have the cobblestone for the pistons either. With the iron collected, I had a couple more big ticket items on the material list. Number 1 was soul sand. I needed about 500 of it, and the iron shovel from the end city made it super easy. Ho ho. Not today, good sir. That worked well for me. Ow. Soul sand doesn't go very deep, so it was a little tedious to get all 8 stacks, but it worked out. Grabbing some quartz for observers on the way out doubled as a quick repair for my pickaxe. Number 2 on the big scary list was trapdoors. 1,080 of them. That wasn't going to happen with a half of an iron axe, so I enchanted a brand new diamond one. Not with fortune though. Instead, I grabbed the feather falling 3 enchant on some boots and combined them with my own. The axe enchantment was again fortune, so I put it on a pickaxe instead. And then I got the efficiency 4 I was looking for. I couldn't grow spruce trees in the overworld, so I went to the cores of the stronghold portal, which happened to line up with part of the fortress, and went through to the end. I think there's a pretty good chance I'm in the top 1% of Minecraft players when it comes to giant spruce chopping experience. There probably aren't many people who have chopped them for 13 hours straight. Unfortunately, that experience gives me virtually 0 advantages here, but it did only take about 15 minutes to collect all of the wood. So I crafted up the trapdoors, along with the rest of the mob farm materials, from note blocks to pistons, observers. Why? Observers, repeaters, dripstone, and polished deep slate. I decided to build the mob farm on the hill behind the castle. It ended up taking about 2 hours or 6 Minecraft days to build. I won't drag the building process out too long, but I would like to at least explain how the farm functions since it's not every day you build one that's 3 blocks wide. This bowl-shaped thing at the base of the farm funnels the mobs into the drop chute in the middle. Above that, we have the spawning modules. This entire farm is based on a really old redstone mechanic called shifting floors. By alternating full blocks and soul sand, you create a height difference that allows mobs to phase through the floor when it's shifted with a piston. This means you don't have to rely on water or gaps to move the mobs through the farm, allowing you to maximize spawning space. That's why it's most commonly used in witch farms, where you have very limited spawning area and every block counts. The straight line world has a very similar set of limitations, limited space and low spawn rates, so I wanted to try shifting floors here. At the top of each module, I used a boat clock to activate the pistons. The dripstone is used to align the boat in a way that lets it press the pressure plate at the edge of the loop, which gives you a shorter pulse compared to the long activation of the corner ones. I built 3 spawning modules total because it was the most I could realistically afford, and then the beginning of the chute, which would lead down to the killing area. I thought it would look much cooler to use glass though, so I went back to the castle to clean up my inventory. I also went on a bit of an enchanting spree. The shovel gave me some trouble, but I got some really good bow rolls. And an Unbreaking 3 book for one of my elytras. I was about to set out to get the sand for the glass when I spotted this. Oh, that is a zombie villager. I don't even think that came from the farm. No, it just... Yeah, that was difficult to come to terms with. It was the first zombie villager I had seen in 83 days, and all I had to do was get within 32 blocks of it to stop it from despawning. But there was no bringing it back, so... sand. I made sure to ruin the environment of a distant land so I could pretend my actions didn't have consequences once I got back home. Just like real life. I'm not sure what I even did to aggro this guy. But nobody portal camps me and gets away with it. Not even scary interdimensional alien creatures with the power of teleportation. And now it's time to let you in on the secret second objective, Operation Powdered Snow. You may recall that the mobs that were falling down from the farm were dying to fall damage. Not only does this mean no XP, but also that any zombie villager that spawns is going to despawn after a short interaction with gravity. To counter this, we have Powdered Snow. After returning to the castle, I smelted the sand into glass, and since it wasn't exactly safe to be doing maintenance at this hour, I instead farmed a music disc, patiently killed intruders, and practiced my mind control skills. Until morning arrived and my glass was ready. Since I need to be able to walk around the farm, I built a collection area raised off the ground. Being able to see the mobs flowing down wasn't just for the cool factor. It would give me the chance to spot zombie villagers before they fell into the crowd, so I wouldn't kill any on accident. The powdered snow on its own would eliminate the threat of fall damage, but it would also inflict a deadly freezer burn. We can stop that freezer burn by instead inflicting carpet burn. Somehow the fall damage is still prevented without ever entering the powder itself. I couldn't quite get the minecart into place before the mobs started raining down, but it was fine for now. The downside to a setup like this is that the mobs are almost full health, so killing them without editing looks more like this. But now that the farm is actually functional, here's what the spawning modules look like in action. The spiders do get stuck in this farm, but they eventually despawn. And we're not even close to the mob cap, so processing speed doesn't matter at all in this case. Looking back, I definitely could have built something more cost-effective and probably faster, but it was still a fun challenge to make the shifting floors work for a farm like this. I spent the rest of the night using the farm, and I don't think I ever mentioned it, but this farm only works at night, just like the spider farm. Because to block out the sunlight with walls, you'd be limiting your spawning area to just the middle row of blocks. In the morning, I fixed up the hopper minecart situation by adding a second one to the mix. And interestingly enough, you can just place the snow right on top of them. So we've got another 14 days here, and besides trying to revive villagers, I was going to need another goal to work towards during the daylight. One of those goals was going to be killing the wither, but for the time being, I wanted to work on something close to the base. I no longer had a source of sugarcane, which was going to become an issue once I had mending on my elytra, so I was going to build a farm for it. You may be wondering why I was worried about solving problems that wouldn't arise until after the 100 days were over. I guess I just like problem solving. I didn't quite have the time to get the materials together before nightfall, so I would have to work on it on day 87. I spent another night at the farm with no luck, and I kind of figured that the chance of me getting 2 zombie villagers was going to be pretty slim. The sugarcane farm didn't have to be anything crazy, which was good because I was pretty short on resources after the massive mob farm. I ended up building it under the mob farm because I figured it would be convenient to have gunpowder and paper in one location. Before I could really get started, I heard something. There's a zombie villager. We got one. Getting him out was going to be a challenge itself, but I had a genius solution. I feel like I should remove the powdered snow. That way everything that's falling down dies, and it just leaves him. Okay, that's, I kinda forgot that the carpets would also break, but this ended up being not the worst thing in the world. The good news was, he wasn't going anywhere. This is not the way the farm was intended to be run. Once the coast was clear, I was able to captain his boat off the ledge and away from the other mobs. At least, the farm ones. And from there, he was safe. I gave him a protective roof and went back to fix the farm. So that was one of the 2 villagers collected. He wasn't looking too healthy, so I made him a well-balanced breakfast consisting of spider eye water and 250 pounds of gold shaped like an apple. He was understandably a bit overwhelmed by his emotions, but he made sure to get one last slap in before converting back to his true self, and it was pretty clear that we were going to be good friends. My instincts told me to box him in a dirt hut, but I decided to do the nice thing this time and offer him a bed in the castle. He couldn't quite figure out the stairs though, and he started giving me attitude. So I put him in a boat with a chicken. The mob farm didn't produce any new zombie villagers that night. Day 89, I finally finished the sugarcane farm. It's a pretty simple design. A daylight sensor activates the pistons twice a day, and the hopper minecart collects the drops. Then, to get in and out, I can use the minecart at the top. So between planting the sugarcane and clearing out the mobs, all that was missing was a light source for night growth. There wasn't really room for torches anywhere, so I went looking for some glowstone. I ran into the shroom lights first though, but Shroomato glotado. Once those were in place, the sugarcane farm was 100% operational. If you want to know just how slow a 2D mob farm is, here's what I've gotten from the last 5 nights. So other than bringing back villagers and fighting the Wither as my last hurrah, the last thing on my straight line bucket list was going to be getting netherite armor. I wasn't sure how feasible it would be, but when has that ever stopped me? I didn't even make it down to the correct mining height before things got complicated. So complicated that my only real option was to go back up and rethink things. Attempt 2, I mined down along the barriers instead, and now that the lava was only coming from one direction, it was much easier to block off. At the bottom, I placed ladders back up, and then I was ready to run into another lava pit pretty much immediately. You don't realize how great it is to be able to mine around these things until that's no longer an option. I mined a 2x2 pathway to make the time lapse look better, so here that is. By the time I'd given up clearing my way through lava, I had 6 ancient debris total. With the 4 I had back at base from mining the nether pathways, that would be enough to upgrade 2 pieces. But I wasn't quite ready to give up on the full set. Mining straight down along the strip would reveal a lot more blocks, and I had the pick durability for it, so why not? It was a bit of a slow start at first, but I did get another 2 debris this way. Eventually followed by another 2. And this is when I started using mind games. It's okay, I don't even want it though, so there's no point in giving it to me because I don't even want it. Unfortunately, the game was not falling for my reverse psychology, and I ran out of space. So now we go up instead. It was a lot slower thanks to all of the lava dodging I had to do, but the chances of finding debris up here weren't that much lower than mining down, and I was able to get another 2, putting me at 12 pieces, plus the 4 I had back at home. That was enough for the full set. I continued mining back to the ladder though, just in case I'd get enough for another ingot. I didn't have any luck with that, but I was in no place to complain. Turns out there's still plenty of ancient debris to be found in a 3-wide world. You might have to work harder for it, but it's there. Now, one thing I have to clarify here is that getting a netherite upgrade template in this world is not possible. There were only so many things that I could get to fall on the line when making this world. And getting a bastion chest with a confirmed template, multiple fortresses with access to netherworts, and every biome nicely spaced out just wasn't going to happen. I spent hours looking. So instead of netherite gear being impossible to get, what I've done is added a data pack to the save that makes upgrading to netherite work the same way it did before version 1.20, just an ingot in the smithing table. And then I was covered in ancient debris. And now the looming question was whether or not I'd be lucky enough to get another zombie villager. Having just the one would be fine for unlocking mending, but I was going to need another if I wanted a Fletcher for emeralds. So I hung out in the area for the rest of the night. Went to check to see how much the sugarcane farm had produced. Obviously not a lot because I was in the nether the whole time, and while I was down there, this happened. It is a nitwit, so it's incapable of doing the work I need it to do. However, its children might just have the correct amount of brain cells needed to make bad financial decisions. As bright as it looks over here, there is a roof above to protect him from sunlight. Then all I had to do was give him the same concoction I gave the first one. While I waited, I worked on getting a stockpile of potatoes so I could breed them. And for anyone who didn't know, harvesting potatoes or carrots with a tool that has fortune actually boosts the drops. So with the bone meal from the mob farm, I had plenty of potatoes to make some baby villagers. Nitwit had finished his transformation by then, and I moved the first villager outside as well. There just wasn't a lot of room on the bottom floor for beds. With the potatoes delivered, it was only a matter of time. I made a lectern for my future librarian, and a fletching table for the stick trades, and spent the rest of the night AFKing the mob farm to repair the mending pick I got from the end cities. So far, there weren't any babies. As a matter of fact, one of the villagers was more focused on his career. How horribly responsible of him. I offered him the position of head stick trader, and what happened next is not appropriate for television. Unfortunately, the child was blind. The diagnosis of texture pack bug colitis meant that he would eventually grow out of it though. That day I really just worked on getting together a bedrock breaking kit. All I was missing was the TNT, so I grabbed some sand from a nearby pond, combined it with the mob farm gunpowder, and that was everything. The goal was to get on top of the nether roof, as that would be the perfect arena to fight the wither. The first step of getting onto the nether roof is finding a spot where the bedrock is just one block thin. For that, you need to find one that's at Y127. Make sure you write the chords down, and then climb up and pearl in the corner. Then jump. I instead walked backwards, so don't do that. If you do it right, you'll be up on the roof, and then you just need to find the chords you wrote down and use your bedrock breaking method of choice. I'll link a guide to the one that I always use. It's been working for me for 3 years now. And it works even better when you build it in the correct location. Always bring extra materials and the stuff for another portal in case things go really bad. So that was my way up to the nether roof complete. I was still going to save the wither fight for day 100 though. I did want to make a beacon with the star once I killed it, so I grabbed the gold from the end city looting, plus what I had mined for the 9 blocks I would need. I thought having a better sword for the mob farm would be nice, specifically looting 3, so I cycled through some enchantments trying to make it happen. Between those 2 swords, I had just about everything but looting, so I put that goal on hold for now. My beacon was going to have to be the smallest size possible, both because that's all I could afford, and also because that's all that would fit on the map. The baby had grown into a mostly capable adult, with eyes, so it was time to lock him in a room until he gave me a mending trade. It only took 6 minutes to break him. The trade should have been 22 emeralds, but due to a workplace injury that I had nothing to do with, HR raised the price a bit. For now, I locked it in with a paper trade. I did one final enchant refresh to check for looting, and then used most of my levels to combine those 2 really good bows from earlier. And the really good swords. So now there was no question that I was well equipped for the wither fight. I got half the emeralds needed for a mending book, tried my new sword at the mob farm, restocked on spruce wood, and practiced my long jumps. Finally, on day 97, I could afford my first mending book. That one was going straight on the elytra. Now my cardboard wings could be repaired, and therefore used. So with about an hour left in the challenge and nothing but a wither fight on the agenda, I took some time to appreciate everything I built along the way. The greenhouse room was definitely my favorite. There wasn't really a reason to visit it, but it looked cool. The chickens that had slowly trickled in through the back door every time I opened it had taken over the tower, and I couldn't even be mad about it. It was a great place to throw eggs from. I already had the stuff needed to summon the wither. How I managed to get 4 wither skulls without looting was beyond me, but I was grateful. I couldn't really remember what the wait music disc sounded like, so I plopped that in the jukebox and then instantly remembered it. Here's evidence to prove that my sugarcane farm actually works. I wasn't lying. And here's me trying to bake a cake from memory. It didn't go well. I think this may be the only recipe in the game that I don't have memorized. I eventually gave up. I didn't try that. I'm still doing it myself. So why did I bake this cake? To put it on one specific table. I can't put it there. I traded up enough emeralds for 2 more mending books. I figured I might as well put it on my armor since it was going to take some damage from the wither. I had enough logs to get it on the whole set. It was just a matter of waiting for the trades to refresh. I grabbed some extra arrows for the wither fight. I guess I'm not used to having infinity on my bow yet. The last thing I wanted to grab before the wither fight was a few potions. I needed glowstone to boost the duration of them, and that's when I realized just how rare it actually is. I had to fly over 1,000 blocks to find some. If only Minecraft were a 3-dimensional game with infinite worlds. Once I had my strength and swiftness potions, I was ready to get it over with. Fighting the wither on the straight line really wasn't much more difficult than a regular world. I maybe took a few extra hits from running into the walls, but other than that, the fight went smoothly. Having a smite sword makes that second phase extremely easy. Back at home, I crafted my beacon, placed it down, and... It's more satisfying like this anyways. My beacon didn't exactly have the strength available like I wanted, but speed was fine. Speed. Repairing the elytra at the mob farm was even more satisfying. And what better way to send off day 100 than by adding mending to the rest of my armor, and repairing it up to full durability. And that's going to do it for this video. If you're interested in playing Minecraft in a different and slightly more difficult way, you can download this map in the description, this time with sugarcane closer to spawn. Thanks for watching.